1,700 years ago, in China, there was this massive, basically apocalyptic flood
Yeah.
that just wiped out an entire county.
Right.
Like every building, every official, every citizen just swallowed by the earth in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, total devastation.
But, the most terrifying part of this historical record isn't even the disaster itself. It's the fact that the local government actually knew the flood was coming. And instead of evacuating the town, the local magistrate used his final moments on Earth to pull this elaborate, incredibly petty prank on the woman who tried to warn him.
It is a really staggering historical anecdote, and you won't actually find it in the dry official administrative records of the era either.
Right.
To find this story, we have to look at a text compiled during the Eastern Jin dynasty called the Sushinji, which translates to In Search of the Supernatural.
Which is exactly what we are doing on this deep dive today. We're looking at a specific entry from that text called The Old Woman of Youquan. Now, on the surface, this reads like a classic creepy folklore tale, the kind of thing designed to scare kids away from deep water.
Right, like a bedtime story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as we've been going through the source material, a totally different picture emerges. I mean, we're not looking at a ghost story here.
No, definitely not.
We're looking at a blood-soaked, absurdist political thriller. It's all about this fatal clash between grassroots citizens and just a wildly arrogant bureaucracy.
That's the real core of the text. People see the word supernatural and they expect, I don't know, monsters with fangs.
Yeah.
But the actual monster in this narrative is systemic dysfunction. It's about what happens when the ruling class decides that reality itself is just, well, an annoying rumor.
Right. So let's get into the mechanics of how a tragedy like this actually unfolds, because it's wild.
Sure.
Listen, imagine you are an old peasant woman living in the county of Youquan. One day, you walk into your main hall and you notice something physically impossible. The floorboards aren't just damp. Groundwater is actively gushing up from beneath the foundation, literally flooding your living room from the earth up.
From a geological perspective, that is an extreme anomaly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. For groundwater to breach the surface with that kind of pressure, there has to be a massive structural failure occurring in the subterranean water table.
Oh.
I mean, the ground is literally giving way beneath her feet at that moment.
Right. And if you're that woman, you realize instantly that a bucket isn't going to fix this.
No.
So she runs straight to the local magistrate's office. She bursts in to sound the alarm, telling the government, look, the ground is sinking. We are all in imminent danger.
She did the right thing.
She did.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a citizen in the 3rd century and I report a massive geological anomaly like that, what is the actual standard operating procedure? Like, what was the magistrate legally supposed to do with that information?
Well, in traditional Chinese political theory, there was this deeply ingrained concept called the mandate of heaven. Natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, droughts, they weren't viewed simply as bad weather.
Right, they had meaning.
Exactly. They were interpreted as cosmic feedback on the morality and the competence of the ruling officials.
Oh, I see.
So the standard operating procedure would be to investigate the anomaly immediately, report it up the chain of command, and likely issue a self-criticism or perform relief efforts to appease both the heavens and the populace.
But, I mean, that requires work.
Yes, it does.
And it requires admitting that things under his watch are going catastrophically wrong.
Precisely.
So instead of sending engineers, instead of investigating her house, the magistrate just sits behind his desk and concludes that this old woman is a lunatic.
Yep.
He officially labels her a rumor monger, attempting to incite public panic. He literally treats a geological warning as a conspiracy theory.
Which is an incredibly dangerous administrative choice. He is criminalizing the messenger.
Wait, okay, I'm struggling with the logic here, though. I understand that corrupt officials want to protect their reputation, sure. But his own life is at risk if the town floods. I mean, even the most cynical, self-serving bureaucrat has a basic human instinct for self-preservation, right?
You would think so.
So why doesn't his survival instinct override his desire to protect his political metrics? Was this specific magistrate just genuinely stupid? Or was there an institutional reason he couldn't acknowledge the warning?
That is the crucial question. And it's really where the psychology of the Eastern Jin dynasty comes into play.
Okay, unpack that for me.
It wasn't just individual stupidity. It was a lethal combination of normalcy bias and an incredibly toxic incentive structure.
Interesting.
The Eastern Jin was a government fundamentally in denial about its own fragility. Decades earlier, the northern half of the empire had completely collapsed.
Wow.
Yeah, the capital, Luoyang, had been sacked by nomadic armies historically known as the Five Hu. The surviving elites fled south and set up a refugee court in Jiankang.
So they are essentially a government in exile, but they're pretending they are still this majestic, untouchable empire.
Precisely. They were deeply traumatized by the loss of the North. But rather than facing the militaristic and practical realities of their situation, the elite culture retreated into total abstraction.
Ah.
They developed a cultural obsession called Kingtan, which translates to pure conversation.
And this, right here, is where the translation for an American audience gets really interesting. Because to understand Kingtan and the Eastern Jin court, you shouldn't picture a serene ancient kingdom.
No, not at all.
You need to picture a massive, failing modern corporation that is just hemorrhaging cash. But the upper management is still throwing lavish, catered networking events in the penthouse every single afternoon.
The parallels to toxic corporate culture are startlingly accurate. The mechanism of failure is exactly the same.
Okay, let's look at the hierarchy of this failing corporation.
Sure.
At the very top, you have the CEO. That's the emperor from the Sima family. But his authority is incredibly weak.
Right.
He is basically a figurehead who spends his days drinking high-end tea and refusing to sign any operational paperwork.
Yep.
Right. And then right below him, you have the vice presidents. These are the powerful aristocratic families like the Wang and the Xi clans. They're the ones actually running the board. But what are the VPs doing while the company sinks?
They are engaged in endless, vicious infighting.
Of course they are.
The aristocratic families were entirely focused on consolidating their own wealth and outmaneuvering each other for control of regional branch offices.
Wow.
Practical governance, fixing roads, managing agriculture, or in this case, flood prevention, it was viewed as beneath them.
And that ties directly back to Kingtan, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Kingtan was essentially a philosophical movement that elevated abstract, metaphysical debates over practical administration.
Okay.
If you were a high-ranking official, your prestige wasn't determined by how well you managed your district. It was determined by how elegantly you could debate Taoist philosophy while drinking wine.
That's insane.
Actually, doing the hard work of governing was considered, well, vulgar.
So the entire system actively punished you for paying attention to reality.
Yes.
It's a corporate culture where sounding smart at the retreat is rewarded, but pointing out a flaw in the product gets you fired.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And way down at the bottom of this hierarchy, you have the frontline workers. The peasants, the old woman in our story. They are the ones standing in the warehouse, physically touching the leaking pipes and watching the concrete crack.
Which brings us back to the middle management, the local magistrates.
Exactly. Our magistrate in Youquan is the ultimate corrupt middle manager. He knows the broader system is broken, but his only goal is to survive his tenure, skim enough profit, and keep his quarterly key performance indicators, his KPIs, looking flawless.
Right.
When you look at his reaction through that specific lens, his dismissal of the old woman suddenly makes perfect, terrifying sense.
It really does. To the magistrate, the old woman running in and screaming about a flood is not a natural disaster alert.
No.
It is a customer complaint that threatens to ruin his performance review.
Because if he acknowledges the flood, he has to write a report. He has to ask the hostile VPs up in the capital for emergency funds. He has to officially admit that his district is structurally failing.
Yeah.
That ruins his metrics.
Exactly.
And in a political culture that executes people for bringing bad news, denial is a much cheaper, safer administrative policy than action.
It is the complete weaponization of bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But what elevates this narrative from a standard critique of corruption into something truly absurd is what the magistrate does next.
Oh, man, yeah.
Because he doesn't just quietly dismiss her and go back to his tea. He goes out of his way to orchestrate an incredibly elaborate retaliation.
This is the part of the source material that genuinely blew my mind. Because it shifts from tragic negligence into pure, dark satire.
It does.
So the old woman hadn't just warned the government about the groundwater. She had also shared a local prophecy with the community.
Right.
She told everyone, listen, when the stone mortar outside the village gate starts to bleed, that means the catastrophic flood is imminent. That is the final warning before the earth gives way.
It's a very clear binary warning system. Blood appears, you evacuate.
Right. Now, the magistrate hears about this prophecy. And how does a corrupt middle manager deal with a frontline citizen who keeps bringing up a problem he wants to ignore?
He pulls a prank.
He pulls a prank. He actually procures a dead pig, drains its blood, and sends an operative out in the dead of night to secretly smear that pig blood all over the old woman's stone mortar.
He expends government time and resources on a practical joke.
Yes. Think about the sheer malice of that. His entire goal is to wait for her to see the blood and then jump out, point his finger, and laugh at her.
Yeah.
He wants to publicly humiliate her.
Right.
He wants to point to the mortar and say, look, it's bleeding, but there's no flood. You're a fake. You're a crazy old bat.
Right.
He is attempting to completely gaslight her into silence.
This really highlights a fascinating psychological mechanism of power.
How so?
Well, why go to such absurd lengths to mock a peasant? Because for the magistrate, maintaining a monopoly on the truth became more important than investigating reality. His ego and his authority demanded that the whistleblower be publicly proven wrong. The water seeping into her house challenged his authority. Therefore, the water had to be a lie.
It's unbelievable. He is literally playing a prank on a sinking ship. He is messing with the fire alarms while the building is smoking.
Exactly.
But here is the disastrous payoff. Here is where the horror drops in the Sushinji. The old woman walks out of her house. She sees the blood smeared on the stone mortar.
Right.
She doesn't know it's a bureaucratic prank. She doesn't know it's pig blood. She just sees that the ultimate warning sign has been triggered.
So she follows her own protocol.
She does. She doesn't wait around to be mocked. She instantly turns and runs for the mountains. She flees for her life. And right after she crosses the city limits, the ground collapses.
A total geological failure.
The earth just gives way. A massive apocalyptic surge of water erupts from the ground and wipes out the entire county. The magistrate, his comfortable office, the bureaucratic records, the entire town that laughed at her, swallowed by the earth and drowned in an instant.
Just wiped clean.
Yeah. The old woman, the one they legally classified as crazy, is the only person who survives. Simply because she believed the warning.
It is a brutal, definitive climax. Right. And if we strip away the supernatural framing of the prophecy, we can see the true intention of the author, which really brings us to Gan Bao, the man who actually recorded this story.
We should really talk about him.
Yeah.
Because understanding who Gan Bao was changes how you read the entire text. I mean, he wasn't just some guy compiling a spooky folklore anthology for entertainment, right?
Far from it. Gan Bao was a highly respected court historian during the Eastern Jin dynasty.
Okay.
He was a deeply educated man who had witnessed the collapse of the Western Jin firsthand. He saw the capital burn. Yeah, he saw his civilization fracture because of elite incompetence and arrogance. So when he writes a story about a town sinking because a magistrate was too obsessed with his own ego to check the plumbing, he is writing from a place of profound historical trauma.
Then why frame it as a ghost story? I mean, why put it in a book called In Search of the Supernatural? If he was a historian, why not just write a direct critique of the government?
Because of plausible deniability. Direct criticism of the aristocratic families or the emperor in the Eastern Jin could easily lead to execution.
Naturally.
You couldn't just write a pamphlet saying the elite culture of Qingtan was destroying the state. But if you frame your critique as a weird local legend about a bleeding stone mortar and a magical flood, well, it's just a folktale, isn't it?
Right.
The supernatural element provided a politically safe vehicle to deliver a devastating critique of the ruling class.
It's a Trojan horse. He masks a political strike inside a ghost story. If I had to translate Gan Bao's underlying message into modern terms, he was basically screaming at the aristocracy like, listen to me, you arrogant politicians. You're exactly like this prankster magistrate.
Yes.
The frontline people are suffering. The economic and structural alarms are running. The foundations of the country are literally cracking open. And you're treating it like an abstract philosophical debate.
Right.
You're smearing pig blood on the alarms to make yourselves feel intellectually superior. But when the hostile armies from the north finally break through, or when the agrarian system collapses, those comfortable, dry offices aren't going to save you.
That is exactly it. And that is why the absurdist narrative style is such a deliberate, brilliant choice. By making the officials' actions so comically petty, Gan Bao amplifies the sheer tragedy of the disaster.
Because it removes any nobility from their failure.
Precisely. If the magistrate had desperately tried his best to build a dam and failed, it would be a story of tragic heroism. But the fact that he used his final moments on Earth and his governmental resources to execute a petty prank on a marginalized woman makes it chilling.
It really does.
It underscores the utter moral bankruptcy of the system. They literally laughed themselves into a watery grave, completely obsessed with the illusion of peace they had built for themselves.
So what does this 1,700-year-old flooded town mean for us? Why dedicate a deep dive to a story from the Eastern Jin dynasty?
Well, because the mechanisms of the story haven't gone anywhere.
Right. I want you, listening to this right now, to think about the systems you interact with. Look around your workplace, your local government, or just turn on the news and look at modern society.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Are there people right now sounding the alarm about a leaking floor? Are there people pointing at structural failures in our infrastructure, our economy, our environment, only to be treated like lunatics by the people in charge?
It is a pattern that constantly repeats because the underlying nature of bureaucracies hasn't evolved much since Gan Bao wrote this text.
No, it hasn't.
The magistrate's playbook is still the default setting for failing institutions. Ignore the public, protect the internal metrics, and ultimately punish or mock the messenger.
We see it all the time.
We do. We see it constantly with corporate whistleblowers who are silenced or discredited. We see it in public health or environmental warnings that are dismissed by officials as alarmist, simply because fixing the problem would hurt the quarterly report.
The instinct to gaslight the person pointing out the flood is the ultimate defense mechanism of the comfortable. If the messenger is crazy, then the message isn't real.
Right.
And if the message isn't real, I don't have to put down my expensive afternoon tea and do any actual work to fix it.
Exactly.
But the terrifying truth of the old woman of Youquan is that the water doesn't care about your political optics.
No.
The water doesn't care if you believe in it. It is coming up through the floorboards regardless of your KPIs.
Gravity and groundwater are entirely immune to PR campaigns.
They really are.
Yeah.
And that leaves us with a lingering, kind of unsettling thought. Something I want you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
If someone painted pig blood on your warning signs today, if the system you live in tried to mock you and told you that the alarms were just a joke, would you recognize it as a cruel bureaucratic prank?
It's a tough question.
It is. Or would you realize that the ground is already collapsing beneath your feet? What is the modern-day equivalent of the bleeding stone mortar in our society right now? Think about it.